Thank you very much for having me in this event. I used to work in the United Nations in post-conflict countries like Timor-Leste and Nepal, in the area of human rights and security forces. So today, I would like to start this talk with a question. So can you think of a big problem in the modern world? Would you think of one? Somebody want to shout out a problem?
Nuclear war.
Nuclear war, that is a big problem. Inequality, that is a big problem as well. Now, if everybody can think of a big problem and remember that until the end of my talk, that would be great. So every day, you'll see devastating news. These countries are at war. The United Nations is defunct. Maybe in that country, the law has been reformed to further restrict people's freedoms. So according to the United Nations Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Nada al-Sharif, the world is at an alarming state of the world. The overall rise in inequalities, financial instability, shrinking civic space, and of course, climate change. So most of you are aware of these problems arising. The World Bank has categorized the year 2023 as the year of inequality amidst challenges of recovering from COVID-19 related damages. World Inequality Report reported that top 10% of the population owns 75% of the world wealth. Bottom 50% are almost entirely deprived of wealth. So the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, reported that in the war in Ukraine, there were 14 million people who are in need of humanitarian assistance. 3.7 million people are internally displaced, 1,143 civilians were killed, just between January and March 2024. The same office, OCHA, reported over 35,000 lives were lost in the hostilities in Gaza and in Israel by the end of April 2024. So, does this immediately appeal to us? Do you see the problem? And do you feel like participating in solving these problems? Sadly, probably not. How can we move the emotion of these people to solve the problems together? I think it is important to put people in the picture. So putting people in the picture is better if we can put pictures of these people, or sound of rough seas of a Mediterranean Sea, voices of people, video footages of people. Maybe even better if we see those people similar to you. So in 2015, the sad picture of 2-year-old Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi. His picture moved many people's emotions. He, together with his mother and brother, had drowned in the Mediterranean Sea while seeking a better life in Europe. The picture made a lot of reactions, and one charity, Migrant Offshore Aid Station, reported 15-time rise in donation within 24 hours from the release of the picture. So we can do it. But did we have to wait until this sad 2-year-old picture, until we move? Actually, if you think about it, we have so much in common. Can we not put these people in the center of these stories to solve these problems? I would say that there are few hurdles. So the first hurdle that I see is that we are so easily divided by labels. People with African origin, Anglo-Saxon people, Japanese, Muslims, female, children, engineers, married, or migrants. It's so easy to be divided by these labels, and it's easy to stop thinking about new people that we meet or new people that we see in the news. We label them illegal migrants and then dissociate from them immediately. Now their problems are not ours. Now, if somebody is dying while fleeing from war, that's not our problem because they are not our peers. Our brain justifies that in that way. In a similar way, we look for some people responsible sometimes when we see a problem. By doing so, it is not our problem, but somebody else's problem. We label them, we put them outside of our mind, and now it's not our problem. We never revisit that categorization. Then we are falling into this trap. They versus we. Outsiders versus insiders. That is how we feel safe being inside, being protected, to belong automatically to a group, and to give up understanding others. Sadly, as Sawako Ariyoshi reveals in her novel, Hishoku, that is translated as not because of color, it is people's instinct to feel better about themselves by putting them above others. But the opposite happens too. Presidents, ambassadors, directors, professors, people worship titles. Suddenly, people listen to those people, agree with those people, and follow them blindly. Once I was in an embassy to get my child's documents. And at the time, an embassy staff talked to me in a clearly aggressive way. He must have thought that, oh, this small, little, reckless girl who gave birth abroad and troubling his time. Well, he asked for my passport and visa. So I gave it to him. And then he suddenly knelt down and put my passport above his head because my passport was at the time UN official document, blue passport. And then he started talking to me in such an honorific tone. I felt how quickly do people change to look at people and not look at who actually he is facing. Sadly, marginalized people can also look for more marginalized people. When I was in Sri Lanka, we had a female staff who came from an outcast group that is located under the 4 castes. She once told me, oh, you know about Miss A who lives nearby? She behaves so badly because she belongs to a lower social strata than me. I could not believe it. I knew that she had a very difficult time. Because, for example, if she goes to a market, she had to go to the market so early in the morning. Because if somebody comes from a higher social strata than hers, then she had to queue behind that person. So how could she use the same hierarchical system to judge others? But I think that's the extent of internalization of the categorization we are given. So we label people by the categories we are given, and then we stop caring about them. So in that way, when people are killed, they are just numbers. We can not know about them. They become invisible unless those groups are relatable group or group higher than us. But if you think about it, these groups that we belong to are not by our own choice. By birth, we belong to a group automatically. In fact, in multiple groups. And also, if you think about it, those people within a group are so different. They are Japanese, Buddhist, women, professors, victims, or even perpetrators of serious crimes. When I was working in the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, we used to talk to the police all the time, and partly in an attempt to stop them torturing people. We continued talking, and in the beginning, they all said, "Well, we don't torture, madam," and they would not admit that they would torture. But eventually, when we continued speaking with them, some mid-ranking officers started to admit that they actually torture. They said, "Hey, of course, madam, we torture. How else can we keep our jobs?" One of them said that, "Well, of course we torture, madam, because that's without getting a confession in an interrogation, we would not be able to be promoted, or we might be demoted, or maybe we will lose a job. How else can we support our family? But if we can do our job without torturing, we would like to be nice to people and keep our job." So that was an eye-opening moment for me, because I learned that even amongst torturers, they are different. They're just not all bad. So they shared their human stories, and as soon as they shared a little part of their human story, we could then think about a way forward, not to torture. So the moral of this story was to think about the people within a category without shutting them out automatically. So how can we avoid getting into this trap of categorizing people? So I think it is important that we be aware of the tendency that people blindly follow this categorization. By doing so, we will stop curiosity about others once we categorize people. It is also useful to know that everyone has a discriminatory tendencies. There are so many discrimination and profiling, like racial profiling or gender profiling. It's just important to know that it happens and check once in a while by trying to know more about people that you have already signed off. I know it is easier said than done. Sometimes some groups have so much hatred between themselves. Sometimes people are just there to win and conquer against another group. Probably it happens in an ongoing wars as well. So in some of these situations, people-centered approach does not work. But if the time is correct, if there's a historic leader, or if the situation gets better even for a short while, then maybe there is a small window of opportunity that can make people-centered approach work. So my example from my experience is the case of Timor-Leste. So for decades, the Timorese people were under Indonesian occupation and the world ignored them. In 1991, there was a Santa Cruz massacre that was reported and outraged the international community. After the president changed, in 1999, things moved quite quickly. And the Timorese people grabbed this small window of opportunity, and that led the country of Timor-Leste to independence. I think sometimes this people-centered view will take some time. It takes some time to get people to think about people who they have already decided not to care. Well, at the end of the day, I think, people are people. Most things are common amongst people. Nationality, religion, sex, or economic status, they are all very small, minor differences. I think categorizing people by these differences ignore actual interesting part of people. Thinking about common parts amongst humanity and trying to see how to solve the problems, I think you can see some new solutions. I think this approach can also help, for example, interpreting international law. So let's take a practical question of who should be protected in international law. If you don't see people in this question, then you may think that, well, the state should protect only its nationals and ignore enemy nationals. But if you see people in this picture, then you will see that children who have nothing to do with fighting, nursing mothers who need safe space to nurse babies, or medical staff who are busily taking care of sick and injured people, they are the people who need protection. Maybe you think that it is not useful for everyday life. Well, I would say it does help. So let's say in a university setting that you submitted your masterpiece to your professor on Friday. You want comments by Monday because you need to submit it. No comments over the weekend. You think professors are those people who should be always interested in your academic achievements. I would say professors are just titles. So maybe on the weekend they are on the beach. Maybe they are out shopping. Maybe they are relaxing. If you see peopleness in professors, then you would understand that this happens, and it is just that any of your very, very well-written papers may not be as attractive as his or her family time. Okay, this seems to be related to putting yourself in the shoes of others. So it is related to having an imagination about how others are feeling, how others are doing, avoiding hasty judgments, keeping curiosity, having feelings and care about those feelings, having open-mindedness, and not to judge people with affiliation. At the end of the day, as Brené Brown says in her bestseller, Dare to Lead, it is people, people. People are just people, people, people. So I think by looking at people just as people and nothing but people, you will have a better solution. By just following the categorization, you will lose your power to meet people. You are letting other people for your judgment. Isn't it better to just embrace who we are, and by that, search for flexible solutions? So does this help, by any chance, in solving the problems that you identified in the beginning of my talk? Thank you very much.